Welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, I talk with Megan Straub from Cherry Blossom Doula, aka my doula. We are going to talk about what is a doula, the importance of incorporating a doula in your pregnancy and birth, as well as important things she wants you to know. So if you're ready, I want you to listen up and lean in because I'm about to elevate your mind. Hey, Megan.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So for the audience today, what we're doing is another interview. So if you caught our last interview with Dr. Molly Bunn, she's a chiropractor that works with pregnancy and postpartum. We've now got my girl Megan on. She's with Cherry Blossom Doula here in, well, you guys are all throughout the valley. And so what I did for my birth experience or journey, whatever we want to say, is I interviewed a bunch of different doula groups. And then from those doula groups, I felt more connected with one more than the other. And that was Cherry Blossom Doula. And from there, the gal who kind of oversees it, right? Do I have that correctly?
Yep.
She recommended a couple different doulas with the group that she felt I would collaborate well with or work well with, because I would say it's a working relationship for your birth experience and postpartum. And so Megan and I set up an interview and I just loved her and I thought she was great. So she just became my doula. And so what I wanted to do was bring her on today because a lot of people don't understand what is a doula. They don't even know this field exists. And so I want to talk about what is a doula, how to find a doula, what is important about incorporating them in your birth, like how much or how little they can be, and anything else you find that's worthy of a conversation today. Yeah. So Megan, I want you to tell the audience, who are you? How'd you get here? And all of that good stuff.
Yes. Well, I am super excited to be chatting with you. And the feeling is very much mutual. I love you too. And I feel so connected to you. And yeah, I'm really, again, excited to be chatting and answering these questions for you. So what is a doula? This is the big one, the big question, loaded question.
Wait, I want you to tell about yourself though first.
Okay.
Yeah, like you're important too, not just like what you do.
Okay. Yes. Well, my name is Megan. I am a doula. That's not my whole identity, but that is what I do. I am born and raised in Arizona. I grew up here. I love it here. Moved away for a little while, was drawn right back to it. I love the outdoors. I love my dogs. I newly am loving the gym and working out. So that's a journey in and of itself. My boyfriend is all about lifting, and so that's been really exciting for me. And yoga. I love yoga now. I went to high school, did a little bit of college, never really found the thing that really clicked for me and really felt right for me. I kind of was curious about potentially being a labor and delivery nurse for a period of time, and kind of quickly realized that I personally feel a little too crunchy for the medical system as a profession.
Crunchy as in granola?
A little granola.
Okay.
Yes.
A little hippy dippy.
Yes. I always kind of felt, I was a nanny for years and years. Okay. So I loved working with babies, but I even more so loved kind of being like a mother's helper and showing up for people and helping and supporting. I've always gravitated towards that. So, growing up, I never really knew where to put that in a career. So I was in and out of community college for years and finally was like, I'm going to quit all of this and move to Colorado and be a nanny. And I did. Moved out there, loved it. They are very crunchy granola in Colorado. I quickly learned, and that is where I learned about what doulas are. Okay. So I was nannying for a family. They were fabulous. They had a bunch of friends. The friends would, reach out if I was able to babysit. Sure, let's do it. Babysat for this family right outside of Aspen, Colorado. They had this big, beautiful ranch, stunning. They said it had been in the families for generations. So, a glass of wine or two later, the mom is home. She starts talking about her kids and, her birth experience. And I'm very much an open book. And I was like asking questions like, oh yeah, tell me about how you had your babies. And she told me that she had had all three of her babies in the home with a midwife and a doula, and that I think it was 4 or 5 generations of her husband's family. They were all born in the home.
Wow.
And at the end of the conversation, my first question, I said, so you had your babies at home on purpose? And she's laughing. She's like, yes, like with a midwife and a doula. And I was like, you weren't snowed in. Like, was the ambulance, you weren't able to get there at the time? Because I had no idea what a doula was. Like,
Yeah.
and all I knew about midwives was kind of what you hear of like, oh, they, show up and they have a drum circle and
Yeah.
burn incense and what you see in the movies. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a realistic portrayal of what a midwife really is. But I was like, oh, I thought it was this very woo kind of thing. She was like, no, they're my providers, and my doula came and she was my emotional support, my physical support person, and this was my plan. This is what I wanted. And really from that moment, it like broke me open. I was so interested and curious about this because I was a young woman and I had no idea that you had options,
Hmm.
that there were other ways to give birth, that you can go to the hospital and not have to be hooked up to monitors or get an epidural or, I just had no idea. I didn't know
Right.
that births were something that you could do or were an option. Um, and I just became really interested for some reason, about doulas. Like I just gravitated towards that and I started reading books about it and watched The Business of Being Born. So
Okay.
it all in the birthy world. The
Yep.
Business of Being Born is a documentary. Ricky Lake, our girl Ricky,
Right. Like the Ricky, for those are that you that are
yeah,
listening. Yes. The Ricky Lake.
the Ricky Lake.
Yes.
Fantastic documentary. And that goes into the business side of it and
Right.
what is, kind of being pushed on women and people who are having babies and families and the medical side and the billing side. And anyways, that's a
That's
whole
another podcast
that is
episode
that is another
in
podcast.
both of our opinions.
Yeah, I'll email Ricky Lake for you Her on the
Yeah,
podcast.
really, I know. Well, because I have to be careful because with me still working in audiology, like I still understand so much of the medical field and the billing side of it and that aspect. And I understand there are reasons for that type of coding and billing and whatnot. But, for me, one of the things that I really did, and I'm fortunate enough, is to outsource a lot of this birth and for the baby because so a doula is typically not covered by insurance, right? And it's not something that's well known, and midwives are not typically seen in a positive regard because of the shows and because of this is going to sound terrible, but because of the propaganda that has been put out there by the medical community. And so that was part of having you on today was so people could learn about what a doula is and realize like there is, like you said, this emotional, physical, mental support side that doesn't have to be just between you and your significant other or whomever is with you because that it's a very heavy load. And
Hmm.
so we need to consider there are other ways to distribute that load so that way each person can have a role and go through that experience or that movement or that environment in a way that they walk away going, okay, that was okay. Whereas I feel like sometimes, and especially with me working with clients on the personal training side, is they walk away from the birth kind of shell shocked
Yes.
and not aware that there were options like you're talking about. Like, no, you don't have to give birth in your home for the fifth generation in the middle of Colorado on a ranch. You certainly don't. I would say that's on the like extreme, but you also don't have to have induction, C-section, epidural, all the things. There are choices in between and it's okay to think you're going to go one way and choose to go the other way or vice versa too. So yes, okay. So now you're a doula.
Yes.
What did you have to do to become a doula? Like what
Yes.
certifications do you need?
So that's a great question. So being a doula, it kind of varies state by state. So in the state of Arizona, where we live and where
Hmm.
I'm a doula, there are no legal requirements for being certified. So that's really a great question to ask a doula when you are
Okay.
interviewing with them, if that matters to you. So I personally in my education wanted to become certified because I wanted to learn as much as I could.
Right.
And when I do something, I do it 150% to where I feel more comfortable and confident being like, I went through this program, I do continuing education hours, I am certified. So
Uh-huh.
I personally, at the time, and this was over 10 years ago, I chose to go with DONA International. So
Okay.
it's an internationally recognized certification program. There are many more now. So if you are someone who's looking to become a doula, there's, Kappa, Pro Doula, DONA. There are many different types of certification programs. There are also ones that are more like private, independent. So
Mhm.
some doula groups actually offer certification programs, but they might not be like recognized by insurance, for example. So that's kind of something where you have to like, does it matter to you as the family, the mama hiring a doula, if your doula is certified, and also as a doula, what are the pros, cons, if there are any, and
Okay.
the benefits of being certified? And then the last time, so that was 2020, I recertified. And then I did again decide to recertify in 2023 because now, and I think this is incredibly positive, a lot of insurance are covering doula costs.
Really?
Yes. So
Oh,
all
I need
those
to check with
listeners,
mine.
yes, for everyone listening, check with your insurance. And also, most doulas we do take, at least we do on in my group at Cherry
Uh-huh.
Blossom, HSA and FSA.
Uh-huh.
And there also is a new one that has popped up called Carrot, and that is, it's like you have your insurance through your work or your job, right? I don't think it's for people who have independent insurance, unfortunately. But you can apply for Carrot benefits, and that covers fertility treatments. It covers, oh yeah. And so we've gotten like a slew recently of leads that are using Carrot benefits because Carrot covers doulas.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good
And
for, okay, there's like one positive thing about the American healthcare system, right?
I know. I was
Like, I
like,
don't know
okay.
which president got that in, but we'll take
I
it.
know. And
Oh
I
my
was like,
gosh.
okay. And it's so funny, because I'm kind of one of those people where I believe in signs and I believe like, oh, maybe not. And then all of a sudden,
Granola.
yeah, woo woo, here I
Yeah,
am.
she's a crunching.
But the first time because of COVID, I was like, okay, I guess I'll recertify. And
Yeah,
next time for insurance, I was like, all right, I'll recertify because the last thing I would want is for a mama to come and be like, I have these benefits that will pay for your services. And I'm like, oh, well, unfortunately, like I don't have what's needed
right,
to meet,
right.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm going to circle back a little bit because we talked about what certifications you've had, the importance of those, the kind of how others can utilize those as well. And so and I want you to make sure I didn't miss anything when we're asking you what is a doula. So we're saying it's a support person in general, mentally, physically, emotionally. It's a person who collaborates with the staff, whether that's a home birth and you having additional staff or people around, or in a hospital. So doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists, even, and even just anybody, maybe even parents that we don't want around, or siblings, cousins, people who are just showing up unannounced.
Yes.
So I would say almost a caretaker to the person giving birth or a guardian of them and what they envisioned. And then I would say a doula is also someone that is going to help walk you through the 40 weeks that you're pregnant and then some of the postpartum period. Do I have that correctly?
Yes, you have
Okay.
that correctly. And you put that, it was beautifully put too. I
Okay.
love the guardian of the space.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I love that. Yes. And
Steal
what
it.
I would say though is that that is a labor doula. That is a
Okay.
doula. So there are different types of doulas, but the
Okay.
doula as a whole absolutely is an emotional support person, a sometimes spiritual support person,
Hmm.
if that's what is needed from us. And again, that's also a really good question to ask in an interview too, if you're trying to find the doula that fits your needs,
Okay.
because not every doula is right for every family.
Correct. Because I've
Yeah.
had, in my experience of searching for one, there was a particular encounter that I recall very vividly being like, if this is how the reaction I'm getting via text message from this person, I don't even want to meet with this person.
Yeah.
And that was because I again, I don't know how I'm going to feel going into this because I think what a lot of women do, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my experience of coaching and training and working with women who are in this phase of life, is they have these expectations when they're walking into that room or that environment. And when it doesn't go that way, it gets very overwhelming. And just because the expectation wasn't met, I don't want to say blanket statement that it ruins the whole experience, but a lot of times that's what it sounds like when they're talking about it. And
Yes.
so when you're meeting with these people and interviewing them, if you don't feel that they're on your team and you're just white knuckling through it, we're putting ourselves in a very vulnerable position when you're already so vulnerable.
Yes, 100%. And it's a lot harder to relax and feel
Yes.
calm and feel supported.
Right.
And that's really what you're wanting and needing and looking for. So it's so important to have that right fit. Absolutely. And,
Right.
it to kind of go back to all of the different types of doulas
Mhm.
and what else we do in supporting, it's it's that emotional support, it's that vulnerability, feeling comfortable with the people that are in your space when you are moving through this incredibly vulnerable and transformative journey.
Right.
So you need someone that you truly feel is on your team.
Right.
So
And so when we're talking about this, what I want to ask is I want you to take us through like your protocol of, okay, let's go through me, for example.
yeah,
You can just use me as an example,
sure.
is potential client reaches out, you go
Yes.
through the interview. So we've already done our interview, client signs on. Now, what are the next steps that y'all take them through? And what I want to do is walk somebody through that so they know this is how your guys' business is set up. It's not how everybody's business is, but generally, this is kind of the outline from what I gathered in my interviews with other doulas. But then I want to talk about getting to the postpartum period. And then I really want you to hash out like, what is the difference between that birth and that postpartum doula, too? And
Perfect.
what kind of experience would you get differently? So walk us through,
Okay.
hey, I'm pregnant. I want a doula. You're it. And then
Okay.
I've had my baby. My tits are leaking. I'm
what
I'm peeing every 2 seconds.
do I do now?
Yeah, and what do I do? Because this thing is looking at me like I should know.
I love this. Okay. So, Cherry Blossom,
Okay.
how we do things, and I'm going to just backtrack just a
Sure,
pinch.
sure.
We do things a little differently in the beginning. So, we do how we do things is you reach out. Typically, that's through Instagram or our website, and you'll
Hmm.
fill out an inquiry and little intake form. Alyssa, our beautiful, lovely, stunning angel of a leader, if you
Yeah.
will. That sounded a little culty.
Matriarch.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We'll stick with the granola. Matriarch.
Matriarch. All of those leads go through Alyssa first.
Okay.
So she receives them and she kind of goes based off of where you're located, can be one
Mhm.
of the big ones. So, like you said earlier, we do serve most of the valley. But so she'll go based off of kind of what we're looking for, or what you are looking for, what your energy is, and kind of place you with people that she thinks you would be a good fit with.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so my question to this part is, so if we're choosing from a team of doulas, so like y'all setup is, it sounds like, and you'll get there, is that the Alyssa or the matriarch of the company is hopefully pairing off the potential client with the potential doula.
Yes. And so she also does a consult call. I
Yeah.
forgot to mention that part. So
Yeah.
she'll do the initial connection,
Okay.
reach out, set up a time to chat with you, and she gets more of a vibe of who you are as a person. So she's like the matchmaker.
Do you find other practices might just choose without that call? Or like, I don't
Oh,
know in that experience. Yeah. So they'll just say, oh, Megan, you go with Ashley. And it's like these people may not even, okay. So
yeah.
I would say it's important that there are multiple touch points of communication.
And it's really helpful because
Okay.
Alyssa does a lot of the work in the very early stages of being like answering that big question of what does a doula do
Right.
Or, she also talks about how much it costs. And that way, when she kind of lays that groundwork, if you decide, yes, I want to interview with a doula on your team, you already know a lot of the things that's involved, included.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're able to meet with me, then it's more of like a fun kind of let's get to know each other's personalities. Let's see if we feel like we would be a good fit
Okay.
instead of me talking about the package.
Right.
And not everybody does that. And that's actually something that's newer to our team that I find such benefit with. And
When
then
should you hire a doula? Like, is there a, because
great.
you brought that up, like, okay, 6 weeks. So
Yeah.
is 6 weeks the ideal time to get in there, or is it?
I have had repeat mamas literally tell me first that they're pregnant with baby number two
Okay.
and like, clear your schedule. I'm booking you.
Okay.
There's really no time that is too soon, in my
Okay.
opinion, to reach out and start forming that relationship with a doula. I know it's a tough thing to talk about, but we do clearly outline in our contract, in the event that there was a loss, it would be refunded to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes up sometimes, oh, I really want to book a doula, but I'm nervous that it's too early. I'd like to wait until, maybe my second trimester. And I totally understand that. Absolutely. But we've held that, many times where there's no loss of money for the mom, for the family. That would be refunded in the event that happened. But truly, the earlier you book a doula, the more you get. Like the more connected we can be. And that's not to say that if a mom hired me last minute that I wouldn't feel connected to her. But you kind of get more bang for your buck, I think, if you hire someone early on. It can be really quiet in the early months of labor. Sorry, pregnancy.
It's like months of labor. Like, you did not tell me that.
Really, really, quiet in the early months of pregnancy where maybe I don't hear from you as much. And that's totally normal because you don't have as many questions. You're not quite there yet.
Right.
But like in our collective, our group, we offer prenatal monthly group meetups. So that's something where you would be able to come in once a month and connect with other moms and kind of learn new things and meet different speakers and providers. And so there's benefits of hiring early on. But also it's okay if you hire later. It's just the big question of, will your doula have availability?
So it's not so much of like, we can't, it's just if who you've connected with can.
Exactly.
So it's almost like the early bird gets the worm a little bit.
Exactly. And sometimes it's the dads that reach out and
Really?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I support all different types of families, but typically the dads are the ones that they can tend to freak out a little bit closer to the end.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like, oh, like all of this feels like it's going to be on me. Like, I feel like we're going to need somebody, an extra set of hands in that space. And, maybe the mother-in-law isn't the best option for that for this particular family.
In my experience, they're not. No offense if you're a mother-in-law, but
Next to the mother-in-laws.
yeah, we respect mother-in-laws. We really do. But in my experience, you just need to be ready to bring food.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I want to drive us back a little bit. So, because I want to go back to our timeline here because we're jumping ahead to birth, but I know there's so many things in between. Sorry, I don't want to cut you, but I'm like, hang on, let's get back to it. So we can hire a doula as soon as we know we're pregnant.
Yes.
We can also hire a doula as the day is tomorrow that I'm giving birth, granted that the schedules align and everything aligns.
Yes.
So it's never too early. There's never a should time and it's never too late. Okay. So we've hired you. We've done the intake. We've done the interview with you or whomever that you're the matriarch of the company feels is the best fit. Now what? So you've got these classes that you've offered. Great. If I go to them, wonderful. If I don't. Where do we go from here?
Yeah. So I'm your doula.
Yeah.
I always tell my families I am here for you as much or as little as needed. I ask you to come to me if you are feeling the need to connect.
Mm-hmm.
you have questions, if you have concerns, my phone will always be right next to me. But yeah, so I am, I'm here for you. We have great emails that go out throughout your pregnancy with different resources, education, third trimester tips, postpartum tips. Like, we have really tried to fine tune the needs and the questions that we get frequently and just put it all in this pretty packaged box, and it can be, again, as much or as little as you need. So I have moms sometimes who, they'll just reach out, hey, are you free for a phone call? Of course. Like, let's chat, let's talk about it. Or I might not hear from you for 5 months. And I'm like, hey, are you good?
Still preg?
Yeah. And on that note, I do ask my families at minimum, at the very least, check in with me after your appointments, even if it is, you're like, okay, got it.
Yeah. Well, and so Megan and I are looking at each other like wink, wink, nod, nod. And I'm thinking like, oh, I didn't text her the other week when I had an appointment. But this is me as a client, whereas some other client, as she's saying, could be like, hey, I need a phone call. Like, what's going on? So I think it's great that, I'm an example as one end of the spectrum, and you've got examples of the other end of the spectrum. So our listeners can see you don't have to be down their throats. Like, because I like sometimes people feel like they're being a burden to the person who's providing the care. I'm sure you get that a lot. Like, I don't want to bother you. But what you're telling them is your job is to bother me. And if I'm bothered, that's a different issue. That's not something that you have to take on. That's, and so it's interesting that women are hesitant to do that, but it's also wonderful that women feel like, okay, I would do this. Like, I need your support. Here I am. And that you're able to show up for that.
Yeah. And, this comes from a decade of doula experience too.
Yeah.
And not every doula is going to practice the same. And I have had, really, really positive experiences and relationships with families and clients. And I've also had learning experiences and ones that I absolutely recognize that I could have done better. And from those experiences, that's where I personally make it a priority to reach out to my family and to go through my list and see who is pregnant and who is getting closer to being due. And, if I've noticed, hey, Susan, I haven't heard from her in a while, I will go through and check on you.
Okay.
And it's something as simple as, hey, I'm thinking about you. I'm just gently checking in, and that can go a long way.
So at this point, to summarize, we're kind of just touching base after each appointment, keeping you in the loop, reaching out as support. Then 36 weeks comes.
36 weeks comes.
And we got to do some shit.
And we got to get together.
Okay.
So how I like to do it is we offer the office as an option. And so the 36-week meeting, it's either going to be at your home or the office.
Okay.
It's typically an hour to 2 hours long. And this is where we sit down. And what I really am doing is I am checking in to see how you are feeling. Are you prepared? Are you a deer in headlights? Are you like, oh, I haven't even thought about being pregnant? Like, where am I? What's going on? Generally, we've done a lot of work. So hopefully that's not where we are at the 36-week meeting. But it's a really good time for us to sit down and fine tune what is traditionally called your birth plan.
Okay.
I prefer to call your birth preferences. I want to make sure that I want to make sure that I know what you are wanting. I want to know your hopes, your dreams, your goals, your fears, your anxieties, your big questions about what is going to happen, right? So I can't take away the unknown, but I'm really checking in. Is there something that we can do in these final weeks of pregnancy to get you feeling prepared?
Is the significant other or the companion or another support person involved in this meeting?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So I request whoever is going to be present at the birth goes to that prenatal meeting.
Oh, really? So if you are going to have mother-in-law in the birth, she needs to be in the meeting.
Yep, because it's important for her too to really hear what you want.
Okay.
Like, this is a vulnerable space, but this is a really honest space, and I support births that are I 100% am getting the epidural as soon as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having my baby in my bedroom
Okay.
in a tub. So I support everybody on the spectrum of birth.
Okay.
And so long as it is coming from a place of informed decision making and you know your options, you know your vision, you know your body best.
I interrupt this episode to bring to you our June discount on our one-to-one coaching program. Y'all do not want to miss this. If you are someone who needs accountability, support, someone to hold your hand through this really tough work of rewiring your mind to let go of yo-yo dieting, emotional eating, binge eating, excessive exercise, this is the program for you. The Mindset Method one-to-one coaching, again, is our most intimate program. You get a one-to-one call with your coach every single week. Every week, y'all. This allows you to process, understand the underlying and root causes to the behaviors that you need to rid yourself in an effort to see the results you desire. On top of that, you get direct access to your coach through our messenger and our app any time of the day or week, your coach being there to help you on the other side. You get customized nutrition protocols as well as well-phased and well-programmed exercise protocols. And these will change over the period of the 4 months that you're with your coach. On top of that, you get resources, self-care resources, resources to help you with your nutrition, access to our amazing community of women, and so much more. For the month of June, using the code JUNEMINDSET, you are going to get $250 off our Mindset Method one-to-one coaching program. You will not want to miss this. Seats are limited as we only have so many clients that we are open to taking. If you are interested, you will want to sign up for a clarity call, the link being below. And in this clarity call, we're both interviewing each other. This program takes a lot of work. You need to be ready, willing, and able to do this work. And so myself and Coach Amanda will decide if you are ready and if you are a good candidate for our program, as well as we hope you decide if we're a good candidate for your coach. And so if you are interested in that, please click the link below. This is only going to be offered to our podcast listeners, so take advantage of it. Other than that, let's get back to the show.
But let's talk about it. Because if you are 100%, I'm going unmedicated, I do not want an epidural, I do not want monitors, I do not want any of this, but your significant other is on the fence, we need to talk about that. Right. Because your significant other may bring an energy into the space, or mother-in-law might bring an energy into the space that is like, the second you start having contractions, she might be like, we got to go to the hospital and you got to get an epidural. And if that is not what you want, we need to know about that now before we are in the space, because we are your support people and everybody should be supportive.
So this meeting is more of, it's a planning meeting, but it sounds like there's also a lot of education involved.
There absolutely can be.
Yeah. Because I would say, even from my experience, Michael and I, so Michael's my significant other lover. We've been together for a while, not married. Yeah. Forever lovers. So we were talking the other day and we were talking, so for me, I'm going to a hospital. I'm going to be completely transparent. If it was up to me, I would probably go to a birth center or even at home. But for Michael, he's not comfortable with that. And I don't want the birth center or the at home bad enough to fight him on that. And I feel like, so what I've done is chosen a medical group. So this OBGYN practice that is well known to kind of be more hands off, less intervention. And then on top of that, the hospital that they work with has larger rooms that I can move around in and be active throughout my labor, as well as, and they contract with the doctor. So yes. Michael and I, that was one thing that we had to discuss even before you came into the picture. Another thing that we recently discussed is, and I think when you come over for the 36 weeks, it'll be much better heard from you than me, because as you know, sometimes when the girlfriend says it comes out bitchy, and when the person who is all knowing and all powerful.
No, you can't say that. My boyfriend is going to watch this or listen to this.
He's going to be like, yeah, you're right. No, she's not. She's very intelligent. So he was talking about, okay, as soon as that labor hits, we're going to the hospital. I was like, whoa, bud. No, like, yeah. No. Like, and I'm trying to, and this is where I'm like, I'm so glad I have Megan, because I can tell him like, no, I don't exactly know why this is a no, but I know it's a no, because and I'm trying to tell him like, there's a difference between labor and active labor and waiting to go at home. And then I've got to wait for this certain pattern of contractions with timing and movement. And it's just going over his head because he's thinking contractions, labor, birth. And I'm thinking like, yeah, but the contractions and the labor can last like days.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to be in a hospital for days if I can be at home eating and watching my Netflix. So that's my perspective of like, hey, this is why a doula is important for the prenatal. I'm not even at the hospital yet. Yeah. So the education purpose of getting together, this is a plan. Do you agree? Do you agree? If we don't, what do we need to do? Kind of like a therapist in a way of, I'm sure that you feel more like a therapist sometimes, as do I, in our fields that we work in. And that's part of your caretaking nature that you have and why you went into this field. But that's another story. So is there anything else you want to elaborate on that meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So I love that you brought up Michael, because similarly for me. Okay. So we're in the space of trying. We don't have babies yet.
AKA lots of sex.
We're going to town here.
AKA we have sex and now everybody knows.
Like, okay, now my parents aren't allowed to listen to this podcast.
We can cut that if we need to.
No, it's fine. I love it. But we're in the process of trying to get pregnant, have a baby, right? I know all of these things, right? But there's still, of course, the unknown. Yeah. But I work in this field. I am educated. He doesn't. So when I get pregnant, we will be taking hypnobirthing or a Lamaze class or something for him to kind of understand and really learn, like physiologically. Like I want him to see that pelvis and the baby doll, like go through.
I want pictures. I want gore. I want the reality to hit you in the face.
I'm like, you need to know, buddy. You need to know. But to that point, yes, doulas absolutely will and can help the significant other and help the partner and keep them calm too. Because with most birth, unmedicated or not, if you go to the hospital when you've had 2 contractions, you will be sent home.
Right.
You might be the very small 0.1% of people who labors really, really quickly, but I always say it is not a sprint. It is a marathon.
Do you find, and I want your perspective on this because I know what I hear, is that people labor, how do I want to word this, is if it's your first baby, you're going to be in labor longer as compared to your second and third baby usually come on a lot quicker once that labor starts?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. The first baby paves the way. Your body's never done this before. Everything is new. So typically with a first-time mama, there's no warning signs that labor is coming, and then you're just in labor. So that's a gift, but it definitely is the longer journey. So if you have a 30-hour labor with your first, I can almost guarantee that it'll be cut in half for your second, if not more. Yeah. The first one, typically, unless baby is in a funky position, there's obviously factors that could kind of change that. But generally the first baby, it's a longer journey, and staying home as long as you can shortens that labor time.
Right.
Because you are at home, you are in your space.
You can eat.
Yes. But if your partner or your mother-in-law is freaking out, they're like, we gotta go, it can just kind of derail things.
Okay.
I always kind of say early labor, the longest phase of labor, it's really irregular. It's really confusing for everyone generally. And there's nothing you can do to speed it up. You need to be resting. You need to be hydrating. You need to be snuggled. You need to feel really safe, really warm, really cozy. That's at home. That is the safe place. There are things you can do to slow it down. And that is having outside people come into the space or leaving the space.
Okay.
Okay. So you don't want to rush. You want to stay home, but the doula will come home to you. We'll come to you. It's
like back to you. So we met the 36-week appointment. We've got our education. Is there anything between 36 and I'm in labor, I need you to come?
36 weeks is that final time I see
Okay.
you in person. Like after that, 9 times out of 10, unless I see you at the grocery store out in the wild, I will generally be seeing you in labor.
So
Yes.
what are you doing for the client in labor? So we're providing support, we're going and interacting with the doctors, but do you have like specific examples of stuff that you like to do?
Yeah, sure. So at our 36-week meeting too, at that prenatal meeting, I always go over kind of what it looks like. I like to go over textbook, and then I also kind of go, it's not black and white. So I'll talk about what if this happens? What would that look like? What happens if we go completely off script and your preferences are kind of thrown out the window? Like like what does that look like? How will that feel? But textbook kind of looks like this. So I always ask my mamas, text me when you think you're in early labor. So you wake up in the middle of the night, you're having some contractions, maybe they're short, they're really spread out, and then you get one and it's strong and kind of like, oh, okay. And then you change positions or you get in the bath or you get in the shower and they space out and they're just so irregular and there's no pattern, there's no rhyme or reason. That is completely normal. That is typically early labor. If your contractions do not completely stop and just go away, we can assume that you're in labor.
Okay.
I generally say the rule is that they're at least 10 minutes apart. So sometimes I'll have mamas text me and say, I've been having contractions kind of on and off today. I think maybe labor's starting. Oh, okay, great. How far apart are they? 30 minutes. Okay, well, that probably is.
Get in the pool, girl.
Yeah, yes. I'm like,
go hang out.
Yeah, I'm like, well, that's, I'm not going to hang out at home for that yet, but thank you for letting me know. Yeah, get in the pool, rest, hydrate. That's really very likely some cervical prepping is happening. Baby's getting lower, getting more engaged. All great, all normal. But I don't want you to pay attention to that because then you're going to feel like labor is 7 weeks long, that's okay. But if they're within a 10-minute window, they're not going away, I want you to let me know. 9 times out of 10, if I'm awake, if it's the middle of the night, my hopes and dreams are that you will go back to sleep, rest as long as you can, and just kind of update me as needed. So the shift. So many moms hate this. Families hate this. I understand it. I understand the hate here, but it's that whole when you know thing.
Oh, really?
I know.
I didn't think you were going to say that, but okay.
It's not, well, no, I'm saying I hate it too. I do, but to that area, like what I like to say is there's a switch that happens, and really what it is that question mark, am I in labor? Is this happening? Is gone.
Yeah, it becomes, oh no.
There's no more question mark.
Okay.
So you can delete the if you know, because
No, I'm not gonna delete that. It's important.
No, but if you call me and it's okay, I'm not going to be upset, but it's normal. Like if you were to call me and you're like, I don't know, I'm really feeling it, things are happening, I'd be like, this is great. This is a safe place to be. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Are you noticing any bloody show? No, not quite yet. Okay. That's normal. How far apart do you think they are? And if you're like, oh, we haven't been timing them, I might say, okay, now is a good time for maybe your partner to time them for the next 30 minutes. But if you are talking to me, if you're feeling pretty chatty with me, if you're communicating really clearly with me, typically we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But some families just need that reassurance. Like, okay, this is great. This is normal. What have you been doing? Okay,
do you find that reassurance is needed more with like first time parents? Yeah. And we're a second time, we've kind of got it down. We're like, all right, like I was here before. Okay.
Yeah. And it's honestly like for full transparency, it's typically more needed. Like if I'm like getting a lot of phone calls or a lot of text messages in early labor, it's usually families that didn't take a class.
Really?
Yeah. I cannot stress enough the importance of childbirth education.
Wow.
Really can't, because what it is everything is new and it can feel so scary if you don't know that it's normal.
Sure.
So like if your bloody show is a great example of this. If you're having contractions and you wipe and there's blood on the tissue paper, if no one has told you, hey, bloody show is a sign that your cervix is softening and opening and dilating, which is a good thing. If you don't know that, that can cause all of the bells and alarms and whistles to go off in your brain, because you're not supposed to bleed.
Yeah.
Right. And it can be something so simple as that, where they're like, oh my God, we have to go to the hospital, and they're racing out the door and they're calling me. And I'm like, oh no, like
turn around, go get a milkshake. It'll be
like it's okay.
Call me when you get home.
And the pressure it puts on dads too, or partners, whoever whoever that extra support person or partner is.
Sure.
If you don't understand like that you are going to make noises, you are going to not want to communicate, especially when you're having a contraction. That's not a scary place to be when you understand that that's to be expected. But if you don't, usually they're like, oh my God, the baby is going to fall out. Like this is, and you race to the hospital and you're 3 centimeters. And and that's like just that kind of, it can just be a lot more. And as a doula, like I am there to support you and make sure that you're feeling more comfortable and make sure that you're feeling more calm. But when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to educate you.
I've got a question. Yeah. So we're talking about like people, why reach out to you instead of calling like their OBGYN if they're going that route?
Yeah, that's a great question. So usually you don't have a direct line to your OBGYN.
Okay.
Usually you're going to be calling the hospital, and they generally will always err on the side of caution and tell you to come in.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're essentially doing almost like an intake assessment.
I can't
virtually or there or whatever, and helping guide like, okay, this is where we're at. Remember we talked about this part, as opposed where I think I would put the person who's calling the OBGYN is hoping that they got the OB. That's the other thing too, is that a lot of women don't realize is just because you've been seeing this guy for the last 9 months who's been looking at your hoo-ha and your belly doesn't mean they're going to be looking at your hoo-ha and belly when you get there. 100%. And so another thing that I want to point out for Megan and those who are birth doulas, like they're your consistent support person other than, your significant other, spouse, or whomever you're leaning on for support in your personal life. But in a professional way, I would say you're the most like consistent one, other than like my pelvic PT or something, what I mean? Take all that aside. So, and I think what I mean by that too, to further emphasize, is the consistent medical trained or medical aware, if we want to use like a different terminology.
Yeah. So I love that you said that, because doulas are not medically trained.
Right. So medically aware and educational in this field. So again, there's a point of contact, like you said, that direct connection. Because I was like, wait, why wouldn't I just reach out to my OBGYN? But then I'm thinking, if it's 11 at night, like
you won't answer.
They're not going to answer. The office is closed, right?
You'll be leaving a voicemail.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And that's also that point. That is sometimes the reason why people choose to not deliver in the hospital, because you're having a home birth, you sometimes, depending, and I might have some midwives be like rolling their eyes, but sometimes you usually do have a direct line to the midwives. So if they're awake, if you're texting them or you're calling them, like they'll answer the phone. It is a midwife. So it's not like your OB, they'll have a 24/7 line, but usually that's for emergencies. And it's, and someone who's on call, you're not speaking to your OB directly.
Okay.
And usually they'll be like, oh yeah, it sounds like you're in labor. You should head to the hospital.
Okay.
So it kind of goes back to what your preferences are. So if your preference is, I want to go to the hospital and get the epidural as soon as I can, it'll look a little bit different with your doula support, because I understand that is your preference. But I want to make sure that you understand that just because you want it right away does not mean that you're going to be able to get it right away, and that there's a good place in labor to get it. So at that 36-week meeting, I want to give you tips and tricks and advice and ways to cope and suggestions and really get that plan in place. Like, okay, you are contracting. They're 4 minutes apart. They're a minute long. They're not going anywhere. You got some bloody show. If you're like, I'm ready to go to the hospital, we're going to go.
Okay.
I would never say no. Oh, no.
Yeah. Wait it out,
No.
sister.
Yeah, no. Like,
get back in the pool.
Okay.
So now we're in labor.
Yeah.
What is your role during that, or a doula's role?
Yes. So in labor, my role is to keep you feeling emotionally comfortable and calm, physically comfortable as I can, and give you information. So I'm an emotional, physical, and informational support person in labor and delivery.
Okay.
Different phases of labor typically require different things. So early labor, you very likely don't need that physical support from another person yet. Typically your partner is all you really need, or you might also just want to be left alone. That's great. That's totally fine. But you might need some emotional support, some reassurance. This is good. This is safe. Like, you're rocking this.
Okay.
Keep me updated. And everyone's different. Some people are like, all right, I'll call you when I need you. And others are updating me really frequently. And that's okay. That's what I'm here for. When you are in active labor is generally when doulas get called in most often.
Okay.
So active labor is when they are regular, they're longer, and they're stronger. So stronger, longer, closer together.
Okay.
It's generally when I get called in to join. Most often I am called when that question mark is no longer above your head. You're like, it's go time. It's now kind of like maybe dad is like, I think we should go to the hospital. Call me in.
Okay.
Like, let me come over. Let me see if we can labor at home a little bit longer. And I will try to assess. So I am not a medical provider, so I will not do cervical exams. Okay, so that's a midwife or an OB are the ones who will check your cervix and see how dilated you are. What I'm going off of is how long your contractions are, how frequent they are, what are you sounding like, how are you moving. I'm pretty good at this point.
Not to brag, but like I am good, really good.
I'm pretty good at this, at recognizing whether or not you're in early labor or active labor.
Okay.
Every so often we'll get someone who, and I am not, like, everybody feels things differently, and your baby could be in a different position. So I have had moms who are, really, I'm convinced they're in active labor, and we get there and they're 3 centimeters. And I'm like, oh man.
Whoops. So
you might be a mama where 3 centimeters, you're feeling like you're in transition, or you're looking to me like you are further along than you. That is okay. Sometimes going to the hospital early is actually where we need to be, because they can offer different, medications potentially. Things to kind of calm things down for you so you can go back home and continue to labor and more comfortably. I've also had mamas on the very opposite end of that spectrum who I come in and you are just coping so beautifully and super zenned out. And I'm like, oh, maybe. And then you're like, I'm feeling pressure. And I'm like, we should probably go. So, but typically I am a really good read. So it's what are you sounding like? How are you moving? And I can help the partner, the dad, decide, we should probably get going.
Okay.
But I really always try to keep it so calm. So if I get into that space and it's like where the energy is really feeling overwhelmed or intense, or dad is freaking out and he's like, oh my God, like, I try to come in like a calm butterfly.
I was going to say, what are we going to use? Like, there's a lot of ways this could go.
I flutter in.
Yeah.
And I try to bring the calm. I bring the reassurance. I bring the affirmations. This is exactly what we want right now. This is exactly what we want to do, where we want to be.
Okay.
Or, I think I think based off of what I'm seeing, we might consider going to the hospital.
I
Um,
would say even at the hospital, though, you're bringing that energy
oh,
or
yes,
that sense. Because I'm thinking, like, at first I was like, wait, did we move on to the hospital yet or not? And then
no,
I thought, like, oh no, she could do this in both. So I do want to emphasize that too.
yes, in any setting. Yes, in
Yeah.
any setting. I really try to just bring that calm, supportive energy. Like
Okay.
I'm a support person. So if dad is like kind of wigging out, okay, everything's good. Let's check in. And then I assess and I pay attention. And I also check in with you. I think that's something that not a lot of moms realize. Like they'll have conversations or, watch videos or read books. And I think that they sometimes don't always realize that even in the most intense part of labor, you're still going to be able to communicate because a contraction starts and stops.
Hmm.
You'll get shorter breaks in between, but you still can answer questions. You still can, like, I still can check in on you and be like, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling this? And in between, you might be like, yeah, I'm starting to feel some pressure in my butthole. I'll be like, okay,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Love crushing the butts.
We love that.
Yeah.
And like you're contracting 2 minutes apart, you're feeling this really intense pressure. We should probably go.
So we're in the hospital. I'm
So,
in labor.
yes.
It's everything's going as it is.
Yep.
What are you doing? Are you just
Yes.
like sitting on your phone, reading your Kindle, or are you hanging out with the hot doctor? What are we
Well,
doing? I don't. Well,
so hospital time. So we will go in separate cars.
okay.
Okay. So we get in our cars, we drive to the hospital, wherever you're delivering at.
Mhm.
We check in, and you will go to triage.
And for the audience that doesn't know, what is triage?
So triage is where they will or will not admit you.
Okay.
So you go into this little room. It's not your labor and delivery room. Um, Again, each hospital is different. So sometimes it might be a little, area with a bed and a chair, and they have a little curtain that they'll swoop around you.
Okay.
Other times it could be a freestanding little room with like a sliding glass door. I've seen some that are like, it looks like a little independent suite, and
Okay.
there's a bunch of them in a row. But really, triage is you will go in, they will want to monitor baby, make sure baby is looking good. And that is where they will want to, but you can always decline. We could talk about that more too, but they will want to check your cervix and see how dilated you are. So they're gonna want a baseline of where are you?
Why would you decline that?
That's a great question. So some women do not want cervical checks done. They
Okay.
don't want to be touched. If there's a history of abuse,
Okay.
that would be a really big one, a really big reason why they wouldn't want cervical exams done. Sometimes knowing the number can feel really discouraging.
Oh, so going back to the girl that's a 3 and she is like thinking she's at an 8 and you're like, ooh,
It
no.
can feel really discouraging.
Okay.
And
Okay.
as a doula, I always try to remind my families that it's just a number. But declining at the hospital, sometimes there's pros and cons to all of these things, but declining sometimes makes you stay in triage a lot longer.
That would make sense because
Yeah.
now they don't really have, because you have to so for me, I try and like think of the doctor perspective. They need data. And the more data you can provide, the better evaluation they can give for what they would hope, or what I would hope, or most of us hope would be the best source of treatment for you. And I'm not saying like birth needs to be treated,
No,
but
but
we do
you're
need to talk about like they need to decide like, do you need a room or not? Because if you need a room, we kind of got to get our shit together. If you don't need a room, then we got 3 other girls might need the room.
exactly. And you're in a medical environment,
Right.
it's gonna be more medicalized.
Yes.
So if that's something that you are really, really adamant about, that you do not want cervical exams, you do not want any
Monitors.
monitoring,
Yeah.
you do not want any of these medical augmentations
Mhm.
or devices, like you should really have a serious conversation with your partner, with your doula, and really try and see if maybe we shouldn't be delivering a baby in a medicalized
Right.
state.
Right.
if you're wanting unmedicated in the hot, that's absolutely doable, but you need to kind of prepare yourself for what that's going to look like.
Right.
And just, you nailed it. One of the biggest ones is like, well, if you go to a hospital that is, a fantastic hospital in the community, and we all are like, this is the hospital to go to for unmedicated deliveries and the best provider, chances are it's going to be busier, right? Like, the good hospital, we want that. Like, we want all of these families to go to the best of the best. But if you're going in and you're 3 centimeters and someone comes in right after you and they're 8, they're going to get the room.
Right.
So that's also why we want to stay home. We want you to be the 8.
Right. Right.
We want you to go in and be like, we're barely in triage. Like, let's go to our labor and delivery room because we are getting a lot closer. And that's just what we see, So it's like, if you go in and you're contracting and you're laboring and you're not really making those noises yet, or you're not really kind of moving in that way, unfortunately, they might move a little slower in triage.
Right. So let's say I am at 8 centimeters and they're like, your baby is. So actually, let me backtrack. What centimeter do we want to be at, ideally, by the time we get into the room of labor and delivery?
Questions. Okay. So unmedicated.
Okay.
I would just be over the moon thrilled for a first time baby if we get to the hospital and we're 7, 8, 9 centimeters.
Okay.
So if we're like in transition, like we are well into active labor, we're getting closer to transition. Transition is the shortest, but the hardest phase of labor. Like, we're going to the hospital to have a baby.
Okay.
Like, I will be like, yes. If it's your second baby and we're there at 9 centimeters, you very well might have your baby in the parking lot or
cool.
triage. So like,
cool.
You like to come a little bit faster.
Okay.
But I want you to stay at home as long as you possibly can.
Okay.
That is the deal for unmedicated.
So typically at hospitals, about 7+ centimeters, they're going to say, let's get you in a room.
Oh, yeah. Well, so for that question, typically it's active labor. Active labor is around 5.
Okay. So 5 centimeters. Well, okay. We'll edit that. So 5 centimeters is when we say, let's get in there.
Yeah. 5 centimeters is where you will be admitted. Generally. So it's not always black and white.
Right.
So it's not like this, you must be 5 centimeters. It just depends, really.
Okay.
But if we go further than that, if you don't want an epidural, that's even better.
Okay. So 5 centimeters bare minimum. Further than that, unmedicated, better, essentially. Yeah. Okay. So now say I'm 8 centimeters. I'm moved. Went through triage. I'm in a labor and delivery room. What is your role? What are you doing for me?
Now this is more physical support.
Okay.
So first and foremost, I do not take over the role of dads. Like, bold that, like put that in red writing. I do not take over dad's role. That is usually one of the biggest questions, biggest concerns for partners is, I don't want you to like come in and kind of steamroll this whole thing and like take over the show. I can't do that. So your partner's job is to love on you and to show up the way that they can. Everybody is different there too. I will say something if he's playing video games in the corner, but I won't say anything, right? If he's like kind of queasy or feeling overwhelmed or anxious, like I show up, I meet you where you're at.
Okay.
That's the biggest thing. I meet you and I meet him where they're at. So usually most moms really lean into physical touch when they're feeling more uncomfortable. So that could show up in hip squeezes, rebozo work. So that's like this big cloth or blanket or scarf that I can use to kind of shake you around and jiggle you and relax your joints and your muscles. I offer and suggest different positions. So you're in this space, you're in the hospital. Our brains typically are trained to be a good patient. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Yeah.
Like sit in the bed and do what you're told.
Well, especially, and I'm going to plot twist this, is because like as a first time birth, you don't even know what the heck's happening. And these people that work there are literally seeing you're one amongst five right now that this is
Yeah.
happening. So I think a lot of people get the perception of, well, they obviously know what I should be doing, instead of me saying, no, this doesn't feel good. Like it's very hard for people to advocate. I don't want to say against medical providers, but advocate for themselves in lieu of the recommendation that's being said.
Totally. Well, and the thing is too, that you have to keep in mind is in labor and delivery, we have some nurses that are incredible. And I like truly love nurses. Like I do not go in with armor on. Like I'm a part of the team. Like a lot of the hospitals, I'm like hugging the nurses.
Yeah. You're like, hey girl, what up?
Yes.
Yeah. Happy hour in 2 hours. Let's get this baby out.
Like, good to see you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we work together. That's how I always want to show up in that space.
Okay.
But the thing is that a lot of people don't realize, and feedback that I get often from second-time families, second-time moms that did not have a doula with their first, but want one with their second, is they don't realize how alone you are in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So it could likely just be you and your partner in this room being like, okay, now what? And so usually what we see or what I hear, like it's, okay, well, I don't know, my first birth, like I just felt like I had to stay in bed the whole time and I really didn't move and I didn't do anything. And I'm like, okay, like we do the best with what we know at the time. And what I'm doing is I'm going into that space and I bring my Mary Poppins bag and I bust out my essential oil diffuser and I put out little twinkling, LED candles. And I try to get it to feel as moody and set the vibes and comfortable as possible. And we get to work. And it could be as simple as, hey girl, like you have not peed in 2 hours. Like, let's get you on the toilet. Why don't we labor there for a few contractions?
Yeah.
Dilation station. I love it. And your brain, you're busy. You're in it. You're in the moment. So you might not even think like, oh, okay, that could be a really good position to labor in, right? I also always tell my families, I don't fix what is not broken. So if you are moving and you are moaning and you're moaning in your belly and you're not anxious and tight and tense and overwhelmed, I'm not going to say, okay, well, this is really great, but why don't you do this instead? Like I'll keep that space safe for you to keep doing that.
Okay.
I notice your flight, freeze, fight kicking in. If your cortisol is like through the roof, if you're just like, shoulders up to your ears, I gently come in, hey, let's take a big deep breath. Let's relax your shoulders. Let's move into this position.
So you're essentially coaching.
I'm coaching. I'm guiding. And I'm also telling dad it's okay. And he's like,
coaching
okay,
and reassurance and educating. Okay.
My doula is like, okay, things are okay. I don't need to freak out. Like,
right.
Yeah, it's an extra support person.
Okay.
And even if you have all of the support in the world, first question, what is their experience in this specific space, right? Did they go through it? Now they're on the other side of it. That could be incredibly beneficial, but also they might not really remember, or their experience could have been completely different from the one that you're wanting.
Yes. This gives me a question because you do photos and I got the photos. So do you recommend people do photos for this reason? Yes.
I do offer birth photography as an add-on to my services.
Right.
Not all doulas do. Obviously, you have to be a photographer to be able to offer that service or offer that add-on. I have never had anyone regret getting photography done as an add-on. I generally only have had people regret not doing it as when I get feedback. But I'm also someone where I'm like, this is 100% your choice. I want you to do this or not, whatever you feel is right for you and your family.
Well, and I think you told me too, like, so you just expressed like sometimes you're not really in the moment, you're just surviving the moment, right? Then in addition to that, I think it was you that did tell me this because I don't know who else would have, is that hopefully nothing happens in a complication, but should something it helps families process what happened in that environment too. Okay, yeah, you did tell me that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so you're taking
absolutely.
photos, everything's happening, you're setting the vibe. We've got my twinkle lights, we've got whatever aroma therapies that are happening. Michael's probably looking at me like you're fucking crazy because he's just like, I don't know, I don't even know what I signed up for with this, but I'm gonna go along with it because I love you.
Along for the
And
ride.
doctors coming in, are you communicating with nursing staff? Are you communicating with doctor? Or are you just kind of hanging in the background and absorbing?
I
Yeah.
can talk so this is one of the big questions that comes up a lot is the advocacy part.
Okay.
So what does that look like? Does the doula jump in and say, no, don't do that, or this is what she wants? Like, what does that
Oh.
look like?
Uh-huh.
So I have a gentle approach to this personally because I want to be on their team. When you're working with the nurse and you have a good rap with them and your things go smoother and they usually give us more space to kind of do what we want, right?
Yeah.
So it is very rare to have, in my opinion, in my experience, because we like on Cherry Blossom, to circle way back, like we generally work with preferred providers who are evidence-based. Like we really intentionally try to get our families to work with certain providers because of their quality of care. So when you're working with a provider that shows up for you, that respects you, that listens to you and understands your preferences, we typically don't have to be like, whoa,
Yeah.
what we want. It's all
And I think that
under their
also too
care.
puts the patient, client, birther in a good position because they're not seeing this tension between a person that has been with me. Both people have been with me, hopefully, but we're assuming OBGYN is a completely different OBGYN at this point.
Yeah.
And you're not seeing that conflict and you're not seeing like, well, this doctor's saying this, my doula is saying this. Like, what do I do? So that
Right.
working relationship that you have. Okay. So good,
Yeah.
good. Okay.
And generally, what I do if I notice like something's coming up, maybe there's a fork in the road, and you and Michael are looking at each other with like wide eyes, and you're like, I don't really know. And you're looking
Right.
at me. I clear the room. Like, usually it's not, well, no, always. If it's not emergent, there will be time to process it and talk about it and make an informed decision. And so I will say to the nurse, hey, like, I think we need a minute to chat. Like, can we, kind of clear the room? Like, I want to hear Michael and kind of make sure we're all on the same page
Uh-huh.
here. Because usually what it actually is if your preferences are now possibly changing. If maybe you're choosing like, I think I'm going to go down this different road, but I
Yeah.
need information. I want to make sure that I'm making an informed decision.
Okay.
So I always, and I want your partner to feel empowered advocating for you. In the past, I was definitely a little bit more like brunt with it, where I'd be like, oh, no, this isn't what she wanted. And what I learned was, okay, well, maybe there was a conversation that was had with your partner, with you, where like, no, we're actually at this different place in our labor where it is what you want. I don't want to speak for you, right? If there's something huge that is happening, like, oh, I'm trying to think of
I would hear going from an unmedicated vaginal birth to a C-section.
yeah,
Like
okay.
that's a pretty huge shift, I would
That is a
say.
huge shift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this emergent and absolutely necessary, or is this a provider that is like tired of you being in labor?
Yeah.
Now, I'm fortunate to not work with providers that are tired of you being in labor anymore, but I do still. Of course I
Right.
do. That is where I will sit down and be like, we're going to clear the room.
Mhm.
We're going to have a conversation. And I'm going to give Michael the tools to really say, we're not having a C-section.
Mhm.
If you don't want a C-section, and be like, we're not having a C-section. Do we have to fire your provider? God, I hope not. That's like the worst case scenario. But if it's something like that, where we're like, no, you can decline. I give you the advocacy to be like, I'm going to say no, like, absolutely not. If it is an emergency and it is needed,
Yes.
that role changes.
That was going to be my next thing. However,
oh my gosh, yes, my
yeah.
approach 1,000,000% changes. And it is showing up in a really calm way, in a very human way,
Uh-huh.
and simply saying, this is what we need to do.
Okay.
It's gonna be okay. I often do, and this might be a little controversial, but I will tell my families, like, if it was me, this is what I would do. If
Really?
I wasn't, yes. And because that's the empathy in me, like that is me really putting myself in this place with you and being like, it's hard to make decisions. And it's hard, like, if you're dancing that line of like, no, it's not an emergency C-section, but it could really turn like that if we keep going the way we're going, which is actually the safest place to decide to have a C-section. We don't
Right,
want
right.
you to be in an emergency. We don't want you to be whisked away and put under general anesthesia. And, that is what we don't want. But usually there are a lot of signs and things that start kind of happening in the labor. And now this labor is looking abnormal. And we're kind of dancing that dance of like, okay, if baby gets it together, we're going to have vaginal delivery. But if it gets worse, this is the safest place to have a delivery, is in the OR.
Okay.
I'm so transparent and I'm really empathetic with that. And it's also really beneficial for families to, in postpartum, be able to have a conversation with their doula. Because I can't tell you how many times my C-section families, because of course, clients of mine have had C-sections where they were not planning to be back there, but they had them, and we'll have that conversation. And it's them simply being like, do you think it was needed? And yes, like almost every time, if I'm being completely honest, in my early days, there were a few where I was like, no, not really, but I still support your decision. But usually it is a yes. Like, we are grateful that we were able to get this baby out safely. And it just can really change the processing postpartum.
Well, and I think why like the C-section deserves such a conversation is because I often hear there's a lot of like taboo around it. I don't know if that's the right word, but like a sense of failure or something like that. And again, another topic that we could dive down the deep rabbit hole on, as I'm sure you could. So just circle back. At this point, we've got your support looks like checking in throughout my labor. We've got emotional support when I'm fearful and not sure. We've got educational support as far as like, okay, the doctor is recommending a C-section. Do we need to do that right now? We've got environmental support of you kind of setting up. We've got I would boundary support. Oh, there's my thumbs up. Sometimes that happens. We've got boundary support as far I don't know why. I don't know how to take it off. We've got boundary support as far as like who's coming in, who's coming out.
Yeah.
Let's go back to baby's out. Everything's good.
Yeah. Okay.
What you touched on postpartum, there's like a regroup that's going on, or because that's what it sounded like when you were talking about like the clients want to rehash what happened, and then also talking about anything else in that postpartum period for you as a birth doula specifically.
Beautiful. Yeah. So yes, baby is born. Woohoo!
Yay.
We're happy.
Yeah.
Everything is looking good. I generally stay about an hour to 2 hours postpartum.
Okay.
I stay in the labor and delivery room and observe. And if I'm taking photos, I'm taking photos of those first moments with baby. I'm making sure that the placenta delivery goes smoothly and safely, because just because you had your baby doesn't mean you're not fully finished being pregnant yet.
There's
So
more.
a little bit of work to do.
Yeah.
But really, I'm there to just make sure that like your needs are being met and your wants are, like your questions are being answered if they come up in that space.
Okay.
And making sure that everything is looking normal. So I always tell my families, if something is not going
right,
anticipated,
yeah,
I don't have an alarm that goes off at the hour mark or the 2 hour mark. And I'm like, okay, gotta go. Bye. If there's a medical emergency, if baby is taken to the NICU and dad is going to go to the NICU, I do not want you to be there by yourself. Okay. So we navigate that. We plan like, all right, let's call in mother-in-law, perhaps. Let's have somebody, so you're not by yourself. Or a C-section is a really good example. Like, if we can minimize, reduce any type of separation, having an extra support person in the space can be so, so helpful. Generally, though, everything is smooth.
Okay.
Okay. So baby is out, you're getting skin to skin. We're starting to like notice if there's any signs or cues for feeding. I can
Mhm.
absolutely help with the first latch and getting baby latched on. And yeah, I just really kind of either, I'm involved or I'm sitting back and kind of celebrating. I'm getting hugs. I'm getting you an Uncrustable from the fridge, like whatever I need to do in that space. But generally at that like hour mark, hour and a half mark, you're going to be getting ready to move to postpartum.
Okay.
So at that point, really, so honestly, the full 2 hours, I would say it's normal, but also I don't want to like just be sitting there while you guys are bonding with your baby. Like that's
Right,
a
right.
really
Like,
sacred time. Yeah. I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? So if you're breastfeeding and snuggled and you're relaxing and you're soaking in that like really special time, generally that is when I fly off into the night and
okay.
I hit the birth space. I always tell my families, I will be gently checking in on you. That typically is just via text. So it could be a couple days later. Hey, how's it going? Thinking of you. Really, that is to let you know, hey, I'm still here. So just because baby's born doesn't mean that you don't have worries, concerns, things that come up right after baby's born, right? Like you might get home and be like, everything the lactation consultant at the hospital showed me, I forgot. I'm feeling overwhelmed. We're having some feeding struggles. Reaching out to your doula will have resources. I will have recommendations for lactation consultants outside of the hospital. Hey, this is normal. It can be kind of tricky the first couple of weeks with breastfeeding. Why don't you reach out to AZ Breastfed Babies?
Hmm.
Holler is one of my favorites. You know, and see if you can get an appointment with them to come in.
Okay.
Also, to big circle back, I generally do talk about that as well at that 36-week meeting. So, what can we do to really prepare for postpartum?
Okay.
Can we reach out to a lactation consultant now while you're still pregnant? Absolutely, yes.
And that
Like,
actually that is recommended too.
yes.
Like one of the lactation consultants I work with is I
Oh,
asked, what is one of their biggest things that they wish people knew? And it was
yes.
literally that people reached out to us
Before
before baby was
or
here.
baby.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's like, it's one of those things, like, I love talking about it this way. Like, okay, you're getting married,
Right.
right? You're planning a big wedding. We do all the things. Like, you find your florist, you find your, wedding planner, maybe,
Hmm.
you find the location, the venue. You put a lot of research and time into it before it happens. The same can and really should be done with birth.
Right. Right.
As a society, we just don't. And I think that's starting to shift, which is really exciting, and being like, there's so many good resources out there and on a sliding scale too. So you don't have to have a ton of money to be able to take advantage of a lot of these different
Right.
resources. There's free breastfeeding group meetups at our office for
Hmm.
postpartum. It's just, it can be really overwhelming trying to find them when you're in it.
Right. So at this point, you're again now going back to the role of like support person and connector of
Yes.
other services. Your role as kind of guiding the birth has been done.
Yes.
Are you doing a follow-up appointment like okay, so go ahead. And when is that happening?
Yep, I do. So I typically tell my families I want to do a postpartum visit with you. Generally, this is at your home. It can be at the office too, though.
Hmm.
So I open up both options. But I say I don't want to do it in the first 2 weeks.
Oh,
Anytime after the first
okay.
2 weeks. So the first 2 weeks are sacred. They're also a hormonal kind of roller coaster.
Right.
That's normal. You might be really high. You might see a bird fly across your window and burst into tears, and you need to sleep. You
Mhm.
need to rest. You need to heal. Regardless of how baby decided to be born, you are in a healing phase in those
Mhm.
first 2 weeks. After that, generally, I'm like, okay, we can do a little bit more of a visit, and I can get a little bit more of a feel of how you are doing emotionally. And breastfeeding too, or nursing, like it can be tricky. You're learning this brand new thing. Your baby is learning this brand new thing. How is it going now around this 2 week, 3 week mark? So it's really not uncommon for me to have postpartum visits at the 3 week mark, sometimes even at the 6 week mark. If things are going really well, I don't want to put pressure on it. Like, I want you to be like, I'm ready to have this visit. I want to come out. There can be some red flags on my end if you are like, oh no, I can't leave the house.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave the house. Okay, well, let me come to you. That's okay. Oh, we're not having anybody in. Okay, well, would you be comfortable with me talking to your partner? Because that's kind of raising some concerns that maybe we might be feeling a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to provide resources for that.
Yeah. And so I think this is again, another sidebar, but I do want the audience to hear there is such thing as postpartum anxiety disorder, not just depression. And it's normal to experience some form of like the baby blues, but that should gradually go away. There is some form that is normal to experience like a mourning period of like, oh crap, like I no longer can just do whatever I want or my life is about to completely change. That's normal.
Yes.
But what's not normal is feeling so overwhelmed, so structured, so worried about your baby dying, or you have maybe intrusive thoughts.
Yep.
That is, I don't want to say it's not normal, but that is a very big red flag that you are trained to look out for, and that we want you to get help for. It is okay at that point to take care of yourself and potentially get on medication. So that way we can get you through that, either psychosis, anxiety, depression. It doesn't mean you have to be on it forever, but I'm really glad you brought that up because I hear it a lot in my space, and I'm sure you hear it a lot in your space as well, that there's almost like this guilt that women feel because, so for example, a lot of the women I work with, they're very successful, higher educated, usually married or with a significant other that's very supportive and successful as well. They have a home, they have a car, like they are fine in a relative terms, but they feel guilty because they have all of these things, but I just feel this way about whether it's depression, anxiety, my body, anything mentally. And that's completely normal. And I'm not trying to minimize it, but it's also okay to get help for it. It's also okay to say, this doesn't feel good. I don't feel good. Because people like Megan and I, we have resources and we have the tools in ourselves to say, like, that's okay. You don't have to feel great right now. But what is this not feeling great? Is it so much so that we're having intrusive thoughts about driving off a cliff? Because that's a real thing. Or is it, I cannot have anybody over because I'm so scared that baby's going to get sick. Then we're going to have to go to the hospital and all this stuff, that now I feel like I'm trapped in my own house, because those are not sustainable. And I promise you from my experience, it only gets worse and it only builds. And now you're, instead of kind of just fighting a little fire, a house fire, we're fighting a wildfire in 2-3 weeks from then. Would that, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I love that. And that is really why I also like to wait for at least 2 weeks, because just like you said, the baby blues, it's normal. It's to be expected. How are you feeling after that first couple of weeks? Are we starting to feel better? Is it starting to feel more stabilized? Kind of like, I'm riding those waves. Or are you in the pits and you can't get out?
Right.
And your doula, hopefully, ideally, my hope, for all of my families, is that you see me as a safe person to say, I am really struggling. I am really overwhelmed. Or if you don't even know how to say it, at least meet with me so I can just see you.
Right.
And kind of try to gently pull that out of you. Because
and chances are they probably don't need to say it. You can just see it. It's when you are working with, and this is more so for, I want the client to understand, as someone from our perspective who's seeing this day in and day out, from our perspective, I don't necessarily, it's helpful that you say it because then I got the confirmation, but I can see it in the way your behavior is. You're frazzled, you're overwhelmed, you're crying and irritable. And it's And there's really no kind of pulling you out of that. Everything is, there is no solution. And I'm not saying like, oh, here, you should just go and get some sunlight and that'll make you feel better. Like that's a helpful tool. But if I were to tell somebody that, they'd be like, well, I can't go get sunlight. I can't walk out because if I walk outside, then what if a car comes by? And then if that car accidentally hits us, it becomes inconsolable, I would say is a good word.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, I can't diagnose that.
Right. Same. I'm a personal trainer.
Yeah, but we see it, you know it. And I don't want my families to struggle with that.
No.
I don't want it can be so debilitating and it can just derail your postpartum experience and it can be so frightening.
Right.
You know, and I want you to be able to speak on it. And even if it's something as simple as like, okay, why don't we, if you're not able to leave the house at all this week, what if you come to the postpartum group meetup?
Right.
This week or next week and you text me, and if you want me to go, I'll go too. Like, I can go. Do you want me to be there? Like, and then let's gently be like, I really like this therapist.
Yes.
Really like this specific one.
Well, and there's therapists that are specially trained in this as well. So, and again, you and I both have connections to these people. So if there's I want to throw this out there too. If there's someone that's listening to this and is going like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
And it's resonating, or maybe you're like, well, I don't want that to happen. I want to prevent that. Please reach out to us, because more likely than not, whether you're a client or not, whether you've transferred money into my bank account or not, or your bank account or not, we are so happy to provide that help, because that is hopefully one less person that has to experience this kind of torture that people feel internally. So I do want to give a shout out to that.
Absolutely. Yes. Agreed. Okay.
So back to you. Off our soapbox. Again, we could do probably another podcast on that. We should just do the doula and trainers podcast.
Give me a little outline.
I know. Shit.
Yeah, I'm into it.
So, okay. Everything went well. I'm healing. I'm good. I'm continuing. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to continue to take my anti-anxiety meds because they have helped me so much. And then I take my booster anxiety med whenever I need that. Great. So I'm going to do that postpartum as well. It's completely safe for breastfeeding. We've got you, lactation. Okay. So now you're gone and someone's listening to this and they go, fuck, Megan's so fucking cool. How does someone find a doula like you? Say they live in Connecticut. I don't know.
Yeah.
How does someone find a doula? Or how does someone in the state of Arizona, or we'll say more in the Chandler, Phoenix, Mesa, Gilbert kind of area, Scottsdale, West Valley, work with someone like you?
Yes. Okay. Google doulas near me. Typically, you will find people. You will find someone. Generally, most doulas will have a website. I have a website, cbdoulaservices.com, Instagram, social media, word of mouth, Facebook groups. Often, if you're on Facebook, if you're in but keep, take that with a grain of salt.
Let's use Facebook as the last resort.
Yeah. You might read and hear some wild things out there, but we are hopefully pretty easy to find. At least my group is. And interviews, we're not all the same. So it is important to interview. I've had families that reach out to me and I'm the first and only doula they interview. And that's great. If you feel that really good connection, that's amazing. But I still encourage you, it's okay to go out and meet another doula. Date around.
Yeah. Well, and let's put it this way. I think I talked to, I want to say 5 different doula groups, or either whether they were independent or with a group. And it's not that I didn't like them or what they had to offer, because I'm gonna be honest, most of them, the doula groups in my experience, kind of offered the same thing. Maybe there was a little tweak here and there, but essentially there was initial appointments, interviews, birth, and then the postpartum part. But it was more so, again, like Megan's talking about, I just got on a call with a couple of them and felt like, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I just like this one.
Yeah.
And it took and you don't have to decide on that. If you're feeling pressured, Like if they're like, well, what do you think? You can totally say, I'm going to take some time and think on it. Like I literally started it a year ago because I thought I was going to have a baby sooner, didn't. And then when I circled back like a year later, essentially, it was who stayed in my mind.
Mhm.
And that's how I ended up choosing.
Yeah. And it's I truly believe that there is a doula for everyone.
Oh, sure.
Journey to finding them will be different,
Yeah.
for you, for whoever, but it's what matters to you. Are you a Christian? Do you really want a Christian doula who
Mhm.
will pray with you at your labor and your delivery? That's great. That's beautiful. That's not who I am.
Right.
And I'm comfortable with you doing that. But if you want me to pray for you, I'm gonna like, I don't know what to say.
I have rocks.
Yeah, I'm like,
I brought my crystals.
yeah, I'm like, oh, this might be out of my realm. But
Yeah.
if you also feel like your doula is being kind of like salesy,
Mhm.
I consider that to be a red flag. But that's also just from my experience. Like I recognize that when I show up to meet and greets or interviews and I am just truly authentically myself, I start having families and clients gravitate towards me because they like me, and that's how it's supposed to feel. That's how it's supposed to be. And I am not for everyone. And
Right.
I also, like, I joke, but I say it is like going on a blind date. Like we might meet and I've had families where I'm like, you are really great, but I truly feel like my doula partner, if she has availability, or this doula in the community might be a much better fit for you. I
Mhm.
would refer you out. Like, it's not just like, I want your money, I'm going to take everybody, and that's what it is. Like, we can select and you can select, and I want you to feel really comfortable. And I want you to go home and have a conversation with your partner and be like, I love her. We're booking her, period.
Right. And so how does someone find you specifically?
Yes. So you can find me at the Cherry Blossom Doula
Uh-huh.
website. So even if you Google Megan Straub, like a
Oh,
strawberry,
really? You're that
but
famous?
STRAB, I think I should pop up. It might be a photo of me with like a bob haircut, but I should pop up. I
Cool.
also have an Instagram. So
Okay.
Cherry Blossom Doula, Doula is how you spell doula.
Mhm.
Megan, all one word, no underscores. So you can find me on Instagram. My Facebook is not for work, but
Yeah.
Facebook is a last resort, right?
It is what it is.
But yeah, I'm through the website now.
Okay.
So if you wanted to speak to me directly, when you would fill out an intake form, you would just put, I heard the podcast. I feel like I really want to talk to her about doula services. Just put my
Okay.
name, Megan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you want the audience to know?
Oh my gosh. I want the audience to know that I am going to be back for more.
Okay.
And
I will schedule that, I guess. No,
And,
I'm just kidding.
if there are questions or things that we didn't touch on, or if you have strong opinions about something and you want to
Yeah.
have a conversation about it, like, I am so open to it. And I understand that birth is not just this linear timeline of it starts, it ends, and that's how it goes. Birth can go so many different ways. So if you have questions or opinions on this, like, reach out
Shout
to us.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, shout out. Like, I love it.
So, and I think that's one, I would actually encourage people to do that. Like, what questions didn't we answer? What questions do you have? Like, if there's a certain thing that you want her to elaborate on, because it's great because it challenges the conversation, and it also lets us know, like, oh, there is this belief, and that, like, for example, C-sections being failure of birth. Like,
Oh,
that's a belief that we need to challenge because
oh
that is
yeah.
not true at all. And I understand that people feel it's true, but it doesn't make it valid and like research evidence based at all.
Yeah.
So we've got reach out, let us know if you have questions. You can find her on Instagram, Cherry Blossom Megan, right? Is that what it was?
Cherry Blossom Doula Megan.
Doula Megan. I should know that. Cherry Blossom Doula Megan. She works for the Cherry Blossom group here in Phoenix, Arizona, Mesa, Arizona, Chandler, Arizona, in Arizona. If you want to find other doulas like her in your state or your area, you can always Google doulas near me. So if you like this episode of the podcast, please let us know by leaving a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, even YouTube. The YouTube video will be available. Spotify and Apple will come out. And again, you can reach me at fitbyamanda.az on Instagram. If you have questions, please head over to mindsetofmatter.com and you'll find all of our information there on programs about me. And hopefully this helps. We'll see you later.